Greetings and welcome, friends! I'm Ash, and today I would like to give you a little sneak peek at an upcoming CRPG called Broken Roads. Set in the post-apocalyptic version of Western Australia, Broken Roads is a narrative-driven CRPG following various groups of people desperately trying to survive in a land that not only has mutated Australian wildlife, but also one that hasn't seen a single shred of rain in many years. With that in mind, I'm sure it will come as a massive shock to hear that Broken Roads takes a lot of inspiration from the classic Fallout games, and nowhere is this more apparent than in the numerous unique options you have when attempting to solve life-changing dilemmas. So if you're curious about what exactly Broken Roads does well as where it falls flat on its face, allow me to share with you my thoughts after spending the last week thoroughly exploring its first chapter. Before I begin, it is important to note that Broken Roads is still in development. As such, not only are there some mechanics that are still a bit underbaked, but a lot of the things I'm about to talk about can, and likely will, be changed by the time it actually launches in early 2024. So consider this video more as an opportunity to gauge whether Broken Roads is something you'd be interested in or not, rather than a way to figure out how good of a game it's going to be, since honestly, that's still a bit too early to judge. With that little disclaimer out of the way, the first thing that really caught my eye in Broken Roads is the simple fact that the world feels lived in. Despite the story taking place in a post-apocalyptic desert, the various settlements I ran across all had small touches of humanity that gave them a lot of personality. Even something as simple as two chairs pointing towards the sunset with a couple of beer cans strewn around can say a lot about the people that live there, and Broken Roads is full of such tiny background details. Also, while this may be something only weirdos like me care about, I also appreciate Broken Roads taking the time and effort to answer the classic trio of city-based questions. What do the people eat? What do they drink? And what do they do for fun? Every single village or outpost I visited had very clear solutions to all three problems, and the ones that didn't heavily revolved around trying to solve them, for better or for worse. All of this represents a very tiny part of the greater whole, and something that honestly most people won't even notice or care about. But even so, tidbits like these go a long way towards immersing the player in the world and its characters, and for me, that is something I consider very crucial for a CRPG. When it comes to the atmosphere, Broken Roads is unsurprisingly bleak, though with a couple of brief flashes of hope here and there. Most people are living in abject poverty, surviving by either scavenging the last remnants of old world technology, attempting to grow crops during a drought in the middle of the desert, or simply by stealing from others. Yet despite all of these hardships, life still goes on. Most people are striving for something more than just mere survival. They're looking for entertainment and hobbies to keep themselves busy, which again helps ground the setting and its characters. All of that extends to the various storylines as well. I won't go into any details in order to avoid spoiling things, but what I will say is that Broken Roads starts off as a fairly generic tale about a post-apocalyptic wanderer, only to become more and more bizarre as new factions and events enter the picture. While I sadly didn't get to see the resolution of many of these plot points, they were definitely interesting enough to make me want to. Another reason I'd love to give the full version a try is to see just how much of an impact I can have on the world. Throughout my playthrough, I had to make a lot of really difficult choices, most of which seemed to have far-reaching consequences. For example, I'm pretty sure it is possible to uproot the leadership structure of the vast majority of the big settlements you visit, and even obliterate one by using their own defenses against them. How much will decisions like these impact the main story? That I have no clue, but I do like the idea of the player being allowed to improve the world or simply ruin it for their own benefits, all on a large scale. Similarly, there are NPCs whose existence or even knowledge of certain events promises major consequences down the line. So I must say, I'm also curious to see just how many lives a simple sentence can change. All of these decisions and their consequences tie into Broken Road's morality system. Instead of going with the fairly standard good boy versus bad boy points you might see in games like, Mass Effect, your choices in Broken Roads affect your moral compass, which is divided between 4 ideologies: humanitarian, utilitarian, Machiavellian, or nihilist. Or in simplistic terms, everyone's life is equally important, the greater good is what matters the most, the ends justify the means, and me, and only me. While this moral compass sounds like a massively complex system that'll likely dictate everything about the story, in my experience, it is basically irrelevant. This isn't to say that the dialogue options aren't interesting, or that the choices don't match the above-mentioned ideologies, but rather that the actual writing itself is what carries the conversation. After all of the tougher choices would have been just as interesting with or without the utilitarian tag added before them. For what I can tell, these options only seem to shift your alignment, which has small effects on your gameplay, and that's pretty much it. The dialogue has to stand on its own, and for the most part it does, so the changes in your character's alignment feel like they're there purely for flavor reasons. I don't particularly mind that, as I hate being forced to choose a certain option because I'd lose my bonuses otherwise, but it is a bit strange to see so much focus on it during character creation when its actual impact is seemingly small. When it comes to the moment-to-moment gameplay, Broken Roads is about as standard as it gets for a CRPG. Once you're done with the prologue, you're able to roam the world map looking for interesting places to explore, people to annoy with excruciatingly lengthy questions, bandits and other baddies to smash in turn-based combat, and naturally quests to solve for that sweet, sweet experience. Unless things drastically change after Chapter 1, that's pretty much it for Broken Roads. Again, I don't particularly mind this, as I consider CRPGs vessels for interactive storytelling. But even so, I would have liked it if Broken Roads leaned harder into its Mad Max atmosphere and made you scrounge or trade for fuel in order to explore some of the distant locations. Just something to add a little bit of extra pressure on you and make it so finding safe havens throughout the wasteland is a more exciting experience. Speaking of which, one of the main reasons you'll be leaving your base town is to complete numerous quests for all sorts of characters, both good and bad. This is where my opinion on Broken Roads is the most divided, as some of the quests are genuinely compelling and do a great job of enhancing the world and its atmosphere. And then there's a bunch of them that are just tedious busy work that really just kind of annoyed me. For example, there is a quest that explores a rather curious question. And that question is it right to kill an old man for the crimes he committed during his youth, fully knowing that killing him won't be fixing anything? There's a lot of interesting routes to take throughout this quest, including being a complete bastard and double-crossing everyone in order to squeeze as much money out of people as possible. And then the next quest in line wants you to find 3 infinitesimally small possums hidden somewhere in a massive city. Something that took me over 20 minutes to do, made me lose my bloody mind in the process, and eventually rewarded me with essentially nothing. That said, Broken Roads is still unfinished, so it is entirely possible that some of these quests were placeholders or just didn't get that final bit of polish. Either way, I can only hope that the rest of Broken Roads will focus more on the story and the characters, as those were far more interesting and memorable than just scouring the entire map looking for random bits and bobs. As for the combat that represents the other major portion of Broken Roads gameplay, that one is hard to discuss as it is by far the most unfinished part. In the build I was playing, a good chunk of the animations were still missing, and the abilities I had access to mostly boiled down to shoot and shoot harder. So right now, I'm in a situation of trying to critique a pizza while staring at a bag of flour. What I will say is that the combat seems to be fairly frequent, even if you decide to play a charismatic character like I did. While I was able to avoid fights throughout most of the main quest, there were a fair few situations where I would just walk into a new area and instantly get jumped by a bunch of bandits. Thankfully, even supportive stats like Charisma can help you out in combat, so any type of character should, in theory, work just fine as long as you build your team around them. My biggest concern with combat, and something I hope won't end up being the case in the launch version, is the simple fact that it is, well, simplistic. Even if the animations were perfect and everything polished to a mirror sheen, I just don't know how long a gunslinging character would remain entertaining when all they're seemingly able to do is move and shoot from beginning to end. In terms of visuals, Broken Roads isn't exactly high fidelity, but it does have a nice style to it. Everything is mostly brown and grey, as you would expect from a post-apocalyptic desert, but there's just enough splashes of color to break up the monotony and make the whole place a bit more lively. There's also a lot of environmental details scattered everywhere, even in the most irrelevant of locations. Buildings are covered in layers of grime and patchwork repair jobs. Areas that people frequent are generally cleaner and feature at least a couple of places to rest, while ruined locations have just enough rocks, shrubs, or other assorted doodads to really sell the idea that nobody has been around here at least in a couple of decades. So while Broken Roads might not be the most technically proficient game, a lot of care and attention has gone into the artwork, and as such, it is actually quite easy on the eyes and occasionally even very beautiful. As for the music, it is mostly background atmospheric stuff that generally stays out of the way. If I didn't have the footage on hand, I wouldn't even be able to tell you what the music is like, though despite all of that, I don't actually think it's bad. It does a good job of immersing you in its world, and for a CRPG, I guess that's pretty much what you want out of it. Broken Roads has a lot of potential, and I must admit I enjoyed my time with it over the past week, the various bugs notwithstanding. However, in order to fulfill that potential, Broken Roads is going to need a fair bit of polish, as the actual gameplay is still a bit on the janky side, and fixing all of that up in a couple of months is not going to be an easy task. So while I am definitely cheering for it to succeed, I am not going to be too surprised if it launches with some of the aforementioned issues still intact. But even so, I'm looking forward to taking the full version for a spin, as I found the story and the world itself to be quite engaging, and I really want to see what happens next. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. If you would like to see more, make sure to subscribe, hit the stupid bell, pet your kangaroo, and do whatever other nonsense you gotta do these days. Thank you again for watching, and I do hope to see you soon. Bye bye!